Welcome to Storied, the untold Jewish stories behind your favorite artists. Season 1, The Beatles. In each episode, we're going to dive deep into the history and the legacy of the Beatles, focusing on where Jews and the Jewish community contributed and collaborated in very important ways. Each episode begins with a recording from our live show telling a quick and short version of the story, followed by a deep dive really getting into it as I interview some special guests. Jewish events today can be appropriately hard. We have some serious issues that we're grappling with as a community. They often require a box of tissues and a therapy appointment. The Storied live show was conceived and developed at the J Detroit in partnership with the Berman Theater, not as the answer to this problem, but as an answer to this problem. We are focused on positive narrative, Jewish joy, and reminding people about the great contributions made by the Jewish community. We're excited to see Storied grow with this podcast and more live shows. Now, you may be here because you're a Beatles fan, or you may be here because you're looking for positive Jewish content. In either case, our intent is for all of your delight. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see this awesome shirt that was designed and made by our sponsor of the show, Yonatees. They make both custom merch and some really great Jewish-themed merch, like the ones popping up on the screen right now. If you're listening on an audio feed, pop over to YouTube just to see what I'm showing you, because it's worth it. If you would like to sponsor an episode, we would love to talk to you. Check out the links below, including our website, www.storied.show, for more information about who we are, what we do, the other bands and genres we've covered, or how you can bring this live show to your city. If you like what we've done here, please leave us a review and maybe some stars. If you have any questions, hit us up on our socials. We'd love to hear from you. All the links are in the show notes. And with that, let's get this show on the long and winding road. When you think of the iconic Beatles look, you can't help but picture those iconic mop tops and sharp suits. But let's start with the hair. While they was originally thought of by drummer Stuart Sitcliffe, it was the dynamic duo of Vidal Sasson and Leslie Cavendish who turned these haircuts into cultural icons. Vidal Sasson, whose family moved to England to escape anti-Semitism, built an empire from the ground up. He was the mastermind behind the angular, low-maintenance styles of the 60s. Think Mia Farrow and Goldie Hawn. But Vidal's lead hairdresser, Leslie Cavendish, worked his magic on the Beatles. Leslie left school at just 15 years old to pursue his passion for hairstyling, and he became a part of the Beatles' early circle. He attended recording sessions, he joined the band on the Magical Mystery Tour, and even opened his own hair salon at Apple's tailoring boutique at London's King Road, which is where the building at 3 Savile Row, where that legendary rooftop concert happened with the song Get Back. But it wasn't just their hair that made the Beatles stand out. Their sharp suits were crafted by Dino Born, the Jewish tailor from Birkenhead. Now, I find it fascinating that while the Beatles were street kids who were trying to clean up nicely and look sophisticated, their rivals, the Rolling Stones, were actually from wealthy families and good families, but they chose to hang out in the gutter and play the blues. In both scenarios, Bino is the one who made that look. And the man behind the scenes, the man behind the lens capturing the Beatles' iconic look, that was Jewish photographer Dezo Hoffman, who actually became their official photographer from 1962 to 1967. And you might recognize that album cover from Live at the BBC. And that picture symbolizes this whole story. The hair, the suits, the photograph itself. This is the Jewish contribution to the Beatles. Speaking of that album, it features many, many covers, including some of the ones that were previously shown. Now, my favorite story from researching this section is Leslie Cavendish, the hairdresser. And I was nervous when I told this the first time because Leslie's still alive, and if you get the story wrong, he can call you out. So he's actually episode 2 of the podcast, and he verified this story and many others. So Leslie's standing at the barber chair one day, and he looks down and he's cutting Paul McCartney's hair. And he says, "Paul, are you working on anything?" And Paul says, "Yeah, I'm working on this song. It's got a verse and a chorus. And, you know, when I get to the chorus, I say, obla di, obla da, life goes on, woo." And Leslie goes, "What does obla di, obla da mean?" And Paul says, "Nothing. It's gibberish. It's a placeholder until I find something better to put in there." And Leslie says, "Don't replace that. It's brilliant. It's such a unique gibberish. Nobody's ever heard that before. And if you keep that, for decades, people will be wondering what obla di, obla da means." And Paul said, "You think?" And Leslie said, "Absolutely." And so He did. He kept that. And because of that conversation, we have the song Obla Di Obla Da. So with that, you guys ready for some Beatles songs? Welcome to episode 2 of the Storied podcast, the untold Jewish stories behind your favorite music. Today, we're very lucky to have Leslie Cavendish with us, and Leslie is one of the people who were there. He's part of the story. He's talked about in the live performance, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. So welcome, Leslie.
Thank you, Benji, and welcome everybody else.
It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on here and be able to ask you questions. I have about 250 questions.
That's fine.
I'm going to try to
far away.
I was going to say I'm going to try to boil them down to the most reasonable. I guess we'll start off with, tell us what it was like to be a part of the scene.
Part of the scene was not. It's more glamorous looking back at it now, but at the time it was a job. It never started off being part of the scene. Actually, was a complete different upbringing to what I was brought up with. I was brought up in the East End of London. Left there when I was 2. Moved to North London, big Jewish place to live, and I left school at 15 years old because I didn't really know what to do. I wanted to be a footballer or soccer, but I still called it football. And
most of the world does.
Didn't make that. I ended up going to Sassoon's, and that was really my education. People go to university, people study. You know, my university was at number 171 New Bond Street, Vidal Sasson, and that was being part of the scene, because I didn't know at the time that such a figure like Sassoon, because he was actually brought up, or he was born and lived in the East End of London. He had he worked at a hairdresser salon in Whitechapel called Adolph Cohen. So I sort of related to a little bit. Okay, I'm going there to see this guy. He's brought up the same area. It wasn't until I actually met him, and you start off as a junior, which is somebody really brushing the hair up, washing hair and watching what's going on. But my first sight of Sassoon was this very handsome-looking man, number one. Always had a dark tan. I think it's part of his Portuguese background. Looked immaculate in his suits. Spoke nothing like I speak, or nothing how you're supposed to speak, but he sounded very posh, very like he'd been trained, which I found out later he had been trained, had elocution lessons and everything. And he was fantastic. He used to run around the chair like Rudolf Nureyev, like a ballerina. He wasn't sort of normal guys you just walk around the back of the chair and cut hair. He would sort of do a pas de deux around there, a quick pirouette, and everything was animated. And when he cut hair, his face was distort for the scissors cutting. I'm watching this as a 15-year-old kid, right? So I'm suddenly realizing that this is something special going on, especially that a lot of the clients that came in, I used to see on TV, you know, or in the movies.
Right,
so
it was special.
That was being part of the scene. That was on the outskirts of the scene, and it was something I was thinking, well, it'd be nice to be part of this, meaning it'd be nice to have clients that you could relate to, and they were exciting. So that was the beginning of the scene. It wasn't until later on that the beat scene came into it, but that's another question I'm sure you'd ask.
Yeah, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s with Vidal Sasson commercials on television and catalogs and magazines.
We don't look good.
Exactly, right?
That was his motto. That was his motto.
And I didn't know at the time that he was Jewish, or that he had, you know, all this Jewish experiences. And in doing research as an adult, I found out that he fought in 1948, Absolutely. You know, in the War of Independence. Did he ever talk about that stuff with you? Did he ever talk about his experiences there?
Yeah. You know, that only came about when Well, I didn't know that at the time. The only time I knew that he was there was this Jewish kid inside him. My aunt, my mum's sister, used to go to the same. They went to the same club in the East End in Whitechapel, and she knew Vidal Sasson when he was about 13, 14, 15. So going to a Jewish club, I knew he was Jewish. It wasn't. How I got to know when he worked for the in 1948. Suddenly, at 20 years old, and I think you could work my age out then, I suddenly saw 5 arrows pointing at Israel to be attacked. And I'm doing hairdressing at the time. And although I wasn't brought up, I was brought up Jewish, but we were called twice a year Jews. Go to shul on Yom Kippur,
Sure.
Rosh Hashanah, whatever. But my parents were very proud of it. Suddenly I felt threatened. Not just me, a few of my friends around us suddenly felt threatened, seeing this whole state of Israel being attacked. So I decided with another friend of mine to volunteer to go to Israel. Now, what am I going to do? I'm actually in the process. I'm cutting the Beatles' hair at the time. But I went to Vidal and I said to him, Mr. Vidal, everybody was Mr. You always polite, Mr. Vidal, Mr. Christopher, Mr. Roger, Mr. This, Mr. Leslie, that was just the way it was. And I said, Mr. Vidal, I said, for some reason, I feel very sort of a personal attack here regarding I didn't quite know how to talk to him, but this is how we said it, that, something's going on in Israel that I feel I would like to go and help. They were looking for volunteers. And he said, I completely understand. I did the same thing in 1948. And that's how he started telling me about what he did. So he can relate to what I'm doing. And he said, no problem. If you want to go, I said, would I be able to get my job back? Would I, get my job back? Please. And I'm thinking, I'm not thinking I'm giving up the Beatles or whatever. I don't know what I was thinking. It just sort of overtook me. And I'm telling you, I'm not that orthodox type of person to worry, but I actually physically felt threatened. So I went to Israel, and I ended up in the Galil and Kibbutz Machanaim, which is a couple of kilometers from Safad by the Golan Heights. And I spent time there going, cleaning up, getting up 2 o'clock in the morning, getting the oranges ready, getting the chickens ready, all the jobs, washing up, everyone had a job. But it turned out to be one of the best jobs I had because we had a swimming pool overlooking the Golan Heights. And when we used to sort of have leisure time, people used to know that I used to cut hair. So the kibbutz leader I said to the kibbutz leader, would it be okay if I cut people's hair? If anyone wants their hair cut, I'm quite happy to do it. He said, yeah, no problem. So I had the best job in the world. I used to cut the hair around the swimming pool, and they used to dive in, wet their hair, and I'd come out and I'd blow dry it. How about that? So I wrote to Vidal and I said, you should open a salon for Vidal Sasson at the Golan Heights at Machanaim.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah. So that's how I got to know about Vidal and his going to Israel in 1948. Yeah.
So in doing the research in preparation for this interview, I read about your experience in the kibbutz and going to Machanaim, and I wanted to tell you that I was actually born in Tzfat. And,
were you? The artist quarter.
Yeah. So we lived right next to the artist quarter, just steps away.
How amazing.
My parents bought a 300-year-old house that had a stone wall around it, and my father had a restaurant. It was the first deli, first American deli in Israel was my dad's restaurant in Tzfat, which later moved to Jerusalem. But I mean, my grandfather used to say it's 2 fingers on the map, right? From Machanaim to Tzfat. It's just 2 fingers on the map.
I didn't even know that Nazareth was next door, Yeah, I mean, I always pictured Nazareth not being there for some reason. But anyway, that's a coincidence. So Machanaim.
I didn't know the kibbutz, but I know exactly where it is. So in the stories that we brought out in the live show and in this podcast, we talked a lot about and really this whole series is about the Jewish contribution and collaboration with an artist. And obviously this season we're talking about the Beatles. As you were there and while you were doing it, and you're working with the Beatles, but there's so many Jewish people in the sphere who are participating, from Brian Epstein to George Martin to Phil Spector to, listen to the show and listen to the podcast and you'll hear this. Was that ever talked about? Was there ever a conversation of, wow, there's a lot of us here and we're participating, we're doing our part? Was that ever a conversation, or was that unspoken, or was that irrelevant?
It was irrelevant. It was those people you're talking about appeared at different times when I was there, not there, later on, whatever. I was the only I cut McCartney's hair in September 1966. That was like 3 weeks after the final concert at Candlestick Park in LA. I was the only London, well, I say the only, yeah, I was the only London boy in that circle who was some interaction with the Beatles. All the others were from Liverpool. And besides Brian Epstein, I was the only Jewish guy there. Now, I never, ever had, thinking out loud now, because I was asked that question, believe it or not, last week, it never came part of it, of me being Jewish, anyone being Jewish. I mean, you have people like Dick James, for instance, right? He had, he was not very well liked. He ripped the Beatles off, totally ripped the Beatles off. Right. He ripped them off because he was a businessman, not because he was Jewish. But you could have had people say that. That was I never have heard that. I just heard he ripped the Beatles off. Yeah, and he did. It was not a good thing he did either. Brian Epstein was the most gentleman of all gentlemen. That was not really brought up too much because he had to hide a little bit. It's a bit like the Beatles song, "Hey, you've got to hide your love away," and that's exactly what Brian Epstein had to do. Being gay, coming from an Orthodox family, he really did have to hide his love away. And the other bit was being Jewish. One of the great things about Brian Epstein was, besides coming from an Orthodox Jewish family, he came from a wealthy family. So when he had to prove to his father, although his mother always knew he was gay, very hard for a Jewish father, especially if you're Orthodox. I don't know who's listening to this, but a lot of the Orthodox people won't accept their children as being gay. Things I'm sure has changed now, or hopefully they have changed. But so he had to prove something to his father, and the only way he could prove something to his father was to do something different. And it ended up that he actually got the Beatles, which was brilliant. So because he had money, it wasn't a matter of, I'm going to make loads of money, like a lot of the managers that took over a lot of the major bands at the time, and they did all get ripped off. So, Brian had something to prove, and he came out of it in shining colours, and if anyone's going to say anything about anybody, you couldn't get a nicer Jew than Brian Epstein regarding, business-wise, everything-wise, So, no, I must say that all the time I was ever with the Beatles or in that entourage, there may have been one occasion that I did hear. I think I know the guy that mentioned it, but it was a bit like, why is that boy, hanging around here? What's he got? So
was that reference to you or to Brian?
It was reference to, yeah. The guy, I know the guy. The guy actually passed away last year, but I've been to Chicago with him at the Chicago Fest. I've been to New York with him. I've met him here. It never cropped up because I did what I did, and he did what he did. It was pure jealousy, but I think that was the only time I could ever remember me hearing that. And I got news for you, Benji. If I had heard it, I come from half my family used to run the boxing in the East End of London, so I think I would have been certainly a right hook may have come up somewhere.
I'll tell you, the Jews that I know from England are all ones that would say the same thing that you did, which is, had he said it to my face, his face would have been rearranged. I've got a friend, his name is Sammy Yahood, who's a wonderful advocate on Instagram, and he would he would say the same thing that you just said. So I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
good.
You brought up the song "You've Got to Hide Your Love Away." You brought up Brian being gay, and that is actually one of the stories in this show. So we're in episode 2 right now. Episode 5 is going to be specifically about that. And I talk about two things, a little bit of, Paul and really John were world-class smartasses, and just loved telling jokes, and being sarcastic and saying and being sly in a playful way, not in a vindictive way. And I think that was part of them keeping up with Bob Dylan and him being, contrarian. But there are recorded instances where they said things to Brian and other people that in today's world would be considered either homophobic or anti-Semitic. And we sort of explore that and talk about it, and sort of come to the conclusion that those were playful jabs of friends and not vindictive, with the idea that he wrote the song, "Hey, You've Got to Hide Your Love Away," because, they really did love each other and were friends. Did I miss the mark? Do you have anything to add to that? What are your thoughts on the way that they talked about Jews?
That was just before that. That was a lot before I got involved. I said I got involved in more Paul 66, the Beatles 67. That was more early on, 64, 65, 66. Hey Jew, could have been Hey Jude. That Jew. There's I don't know.
I thought that was supposed to be Hey Jules, and Paul didn't want to insult.
Lennon on tape has called him Hey Jew.
Right.
There is something there. You're absolutely right. If he had said it in today's world, he would be pulled up on that. But I think that, there's another remark. Was it something happened, and they said, "Well, what does he know? He's his family is Jewish furniture people, not business." References to that. Now,
there was other more direct stuff. I'm looking at my notes so that I say it accurately, but there's the "baby, you're a rich man," and then John saying, "Well, baby, you're a rich Jew," and and things like that. And when Brian wrote his book and "A Cellar Full of Noise," and John said it should be called "A Cellar Full of Boys," or maybe even "A Cellar Full of Goys," right? Things like that, which I think this is one of those things that people talk about, like, if you saw, not me, because my text messages are all virtuous, but people talk about if anybody ever saw my group chat, I'd go to jail, right? People say goofy stuff between friends, people make jokes, sometimes it's referred to as locker room talk, things like that. And I think that banter, just guys ribbing each other. Me and my friends often make jokes at each other's expense that I would never allow a stranger to say to my face, right? Like that. There's a different aura, and I as unpleasant as those comments can be when you read them, or cringeworthy, it sounds like it really was just guys goofing on each other.
It was, and yes, it was. You get the somebody who could even think about songs, and Lennon used to, and Paul, and a lot of songwriters. They see something in the newspaper, they see an incident, they'll take a little line from it, they'll remember something, and it'll go into a song. There was a song that the Beatles, on the first album, I think, "Please Please Me," called "Boys." It's a really good song. "Boys," it's a really good song. Lennon, if he was writing songs, guys, boys, it's the way his head thinks, they put these sentences together, and it can end up with a bloody great big song, beautiful song. So I would say everyone, you couldn't say that today, what he said. He probably, if Epstein was alive and he said it, he would say it was a joke. If he said it to somebody else, he would be done for it, but he wouldn't say it. And it was banter, it was a play on words, and it was always ribbing. If you can imagine, Benji, that you are straight, well, you are, but you're straight, and Paul McCartney's going out with these girls, and and George Harrison's going out with lovely girls. Brian Epstein ain't going out with any girls. You never see Brian Epstein with anybody.
Right.
You know, all his going out was after dark. So they all knew that. The press can't quite understand it, or they know, but they don't say anything. So yeah, you got 4 guys from Liverpool seeing a very successful guy, making them successful. Brian Epstein never called the Beatles. He called them my boys. They were his boys.
I love that.
So knowing what Lennon's background is, and knowing what the Beatles' backgrounds are, I'd see that as pure banter. Come on, Brian, when you're getting married? I mean, he could have easily just said, when you're getting married, Brian, put him in a situation. So, and he probably did. You know, we won't tell anyone, Brian, you know.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's really more than just reaffirming that my conclusion was accurate, just knowing that that it really was just, you know, guys being kind and very loving. And, you know, the story with John and Brian going on the vacation to Barcelona and like that whole, like it just, it makes sense. And I'm really glad that it wasn't nefarious. It was really just, you know, people goofing on each other. And I really love that.
Yes,
I feel like I feel like we've gone backwards from where the interview the stories, but let's go back.
Questions.
right. Let's go back a little bit. You started off working for Vidal, and then one day you're cutting Jane Asher's hair, and then the next day you're cutting Paul McCartney's hair. Can you talk about that? Like, how did that happen?
Just happens.
Just happens.
There's a long and winding road, may I say, to get to that point.
Beautiful reference. Well done.
Yeah. You start off at Sassoon's, you start washing hair, the whole job is to go and be with a stylist for 3 months, check out different styles, different techniques. Along the line that you're cutting famous people's hair, you're washing people's hair. And eventually, during this course of my apprenticeship, my stylist, a guy called Mr. Roger Thompson, artistic director of Sassoon, used to do Jane Asher's hair. She had long, strawberry blonde hair down to her shoulders, very, very thick. And what a stylist would do, he would just trim it. Vidal's philosophy as well, and they don't do this today. I did a hairdressing talk recently, but Vidal always insisted that you cut the hair dry first, wash it, and then check it after when it's wet. Okay, not the other way around. Reason being is it does take time to do that, but you know, you want to look good, we want to look good, so that's what you do.
So and it takes time to be beautiful.
Yeah.
Right. This doesn't just happen. This doesn't just happen.
It doesn't. Or it can just happen. There's some very beautiful people without any makeup or anything. But, you know, it wasn't hard for me to see how much her hair cut because it was only trimmed at the bottom. I used to wash it, and then what my job was to hand dry it, blow dry it, and make sure it was all okay for Mr. Roger to come along, get his magic scissors out again, just check any ends that were straggling, trim it. Leslie, give me the back mirror. Here's the back mirror. Thank you, Jane. See you very soon. Fine, no problem at all. I became a hairstylist, qualified, and Roger, we used to get clients who would like to, it was coming called a comb out. So it meant they didn't want a big deal. They're probably going somewhere. They wanted a quick wash and a blow dry, and you could do in and out within 45 minutes, which was possible. The receptionist said to Roger, or said to me, no, not to me, said to Roger, can you do Jane's hair? And he is unfortunately one of the slowest. He was one of the slowest hairdressers that you could imagine. He really was. When I was a junior, they used to get the 8:30 was 9 o'clock, 9:30. It just used to pile up and pile up. I have to keep making excuses. So Roger said to the receptionist, I can't do her hair because I'm running behind. Why don't you get Leslie to do it? Because Leslie knows how to do it. And there I was. I was a young guy, just started. And I did her hair. Instead of me washing her hair, I got someone else to wash it. I checked the hair, any straggling ends, I did it. It was very easy. Thank you very much. On 3 occasions, Jane came down for the same thing. But on 3 occasions, Roger Thompson, in his wisdom, said, I can't do it. And she was getting a little bit paid off because she's a good client. One of the things is that Vidal always taught us was don't ask too many questions to the client. Always respect, that they pay, that you can respect the client. Sometimes they want to talk, sometimes they don't want to talk. So all the time that she came in, you didn't have to be a brain surgeon to know that she was going out with Paul McCartney. If she was in the papers with him, she was at premieres with him, but you never sort of said, oh, by the way, Jane, how's Paul? Or what the Beatles doing? Just kept still. That's basically what you did. And if you wanted to talk, you spoke. So on that particular occasion, so Roger should have known a little bit better. Maybe he didn't have the old brain to think, you know what, I'll fit her in quickly and let the other client wait. And on the 3rd occasion, the receptionist said, Jane's really not very happy with Roger. He can't fit her in again. Will you do it? So I've done it 2 or 3 times before. Went through the same scenario on a Saturday morning, it was. Showed her the back mirror and said, Jane, thank you very much. Have a nice day. And she said, what are you doing this afternoon? Which was a bit of a, whoops, hello, what's going on here? What am I doing this afternoon? And I said, well, why is that, Jane? So she said, and this is what I love. Have you got time to cut my boyfriend's hair? Have I got time to cut your boyfriend's hair? I think I've got time to cut your boyfriend's hair. Knowing that my sister's got Paul McCartney's pictures all around the wall. And the boyfriend's Paul McCartney. Right? So I don't say even Paul McCartney. I said, yes, I have got time to cut your boyfriend's hair. Yeah, fine. What suits you? And she then throws it back at me and said, well, what suits you? And I pushed my luck. And I was going to a football game in the afternoon. And I'd really said it as a joke, so I would have gone straight away. And I said, maybe 5:30 in the afternoon, because the football match finishes at 4:45, and I know where I can get to. And I really was a joke. I was saying, no, come on, I'll do it at 2:00, anytime, an hour's time. And she said, that's fine. And I went, oh, okay, that's good. and then I thought, Jane, by the way, where do you live? And then she said, oh, right. So she got a pen. She got a pen. And she went, bit of paper, gave it to me. They said, Cavendish Avenue. And I said, Jane, that's my surname. They said, well, maybe it was meant, Leslie. So that's how I actually got to do it. Just something just a bit weirder. On your 198th question about Lennon, must be your 199th question, I was asked to go and cut Lennon's hair. Because Paul McCartney lived in London, in St John's Wood, the other 3 Beatles lived down in Weybridge, down in St George's, which is about a 2-hour drive. Typical big mansion, got the full Monty there, and it was around the corner. And somebody, the press officer, said to me, I think John would like you to go down there and cut his hair. I thought, oh, okay, why not? And I said, where does he live? He said, Cavendish Close. You tell me, Benji, if it's meant or is meant. So there you go.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It could only be better if it was Jewish Hairdressers Lane.
Well, that was just a really strange. Cavendish Close, Cavendish Avenue. It was meant, That was all.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's how I ended up going with it. That's exactly how I got to do one of the Beatles. So the others followed later. So, but Paul McCartney, Jane Asher. I always relate to Roger Thompson because he got very jealous. He tried to, because I went to Israel, because I cut the Beatles' hair, he basically had it in for me. Mm-hmm. And I put Roger down as the Pete Best of hairdressing. He could have been, he was the one, but he didn't take his chance.
Yeah.
But there you go.
I think this qualifies as I'd rather be lucky than good. Right? You got lucky. You were in the right place at the right time. You got the opportunity and you took it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
I've seen some interviews that you've done and some speeches and, events that you've been at. And you talk about the humility of fame and how you never asked for autographs and you never asked for favors and you never, tried to capitalize. You were just there doing your job and, kind of nose to the grindstone type of thing. Any major stuff or any major thoughts that you have about like, I wish I would have done this, or I'm glad I didn't do that, or like any
Okay.
highlights?
Okay. So going back to what Sassoon said, keep your mouth shut, talk, and respect. Now, I go round to Paul McCartney's house. It's all to do with timing. Now, the Beatles had just finished their last concert 3 weeks later. I'm there. Paul McCartney's unshaven. Paul McCartney's having a drink or two. It's quite well documented, but he was going through a bit of a period at that time. And he didn't want to go out. So, having your hair done is quite relaxing. And if you've got a familiar face around you, and Jane had obviously told him that I could be trusted, because I never told anybody that I was going to cut Paul McCartney's hair. So that was just between me and my scissors. One of the things I thought, this is, again, a great opportunity. How, cutting the Beatles' hair is like, well, Paul McCartney's hair at least. I'm a Beatles fan, number one. Okay, it's not as if I'm doing someone else's hair and I don't like their music. I happen to like the Beatles, really did. And I thought, you know what? I know they get hundreds of people just asking for their autograph. It would have been so easy for me to ask this autograph. It would have been so easy for me to have taken their hair. It would have been so easy for me to do anything. But would it have lasted? And I use this sort of analogy. I say, I didn't want to cut a single. I wanted to cut an album, right? I really did. I didn't want it to be a one-off. So I decided not to ask any questions until, I'm quite good at talking to basically anybody, right? If Paul McCartney wants to have, even at that age, I've brought up in a mad Jewish household with 5 women around me and uncles and aunts floating in and out. So, I come from a very loud family. So, so talking wasn't really bothering me too much. So listening to him. So I thought to myself, what do you talk about when you finish the hair? And again, it's all to do, it's a bit of luck, the way it turns out. I'm cutting Paul McCartney's at his house. He's not coming into a salon. He's not sitting in front of the chair. I'm not talking to him in the mirror. I'm talking to him in the bathroom, basically, when I was doing his hair. And then we go downstairs, have some tea. I can't just sit there like a lemon and just not ask anything. So I sort of said to him, are you writing? Are you writing anything? Are you doing anything? That would be my question to him. Well, he's not going to shy away from saying, no, I'm not writing. How dare you ask me if I'm writing? He was only too happy. So he played me a few songs that eventually ended up on the Sgt. Pepper that I didn't know about. Again, I kept quiet. Right? My idea was, I said to Paul, once I felt that he could trust me, and I did hear shouting and screaming going on in the house. I saw a few drugs being passed about within the Beatles.
Allegedly.
Things that were going on that could have easily earned me a few bob for a newspaper thing, and that would have been the end. Paul McCartney, when I first went round there, had a housekeeper called Mrs. Kelly. Mrs. Kelly and her husband. Mrs. Kelly was an Australian housekeeper. What a job she must have had, right? Housekeeper to Paul McCartney. Her husband, the gardener and the chauffeur. What an incredible duo. What does she do? Sells her story to the Australian newspaper. She gets a sack, right? So she can turn around and say, I once was the housekeeper to Paul McCartney. Yeah, you could have been housekeeper to Paul McCartney for another 10 years if you went down the right path. So all I wanted was, once he felt that that whatever I saw never was in the newspapers, not through me anyway, can I watch you record or rehearse? That was and I got a yes. So I watched the Beatles record and rehearse a dozen times at Abbey Road. at least 8 times at Trident Studios, which is in Soho, where they did Hey Jude and things. I went to Olympic Studios, which is in Barnes, where John Lennon recorded with Yoko. And you wouldn't have got invited to these places if I'd been pestering them for autographs or whatever.
Right.
So, that was my lottery win, if you understand. Would I have done anything different? My dear, lovely wife, had I married her in the early days, although my ex-wife, we have 2 lovely kids, but my wife today is a very successful business person in the fashion business, very, very successful. And I've told her this before, I wish we knew each other then, which we did know each other, fun enough. That's another story, but I wish, she would have guided me through a business. I'm not the greatest businessman. I quite can do everything else. I'm not bad, but that's probably the only thing. I don't regret it, but there's a lot of hairdressers. I mean, Sassoon had a very successful financial backer, although with his talent, this person financed him for his first salon. He had good business people around him. One of my problems was that I became a little bit of a one-man band, because when you do people like the Bee Gees, the Beatles, and lots of other people where you have a personal rapport with them while you're doing your hair, it meant that, what do? Do I say, I'm going on holiday, could you please go around and cut Paul McCartney's hair? I'm not going to do that, am I? So
Right.
It became a little bit of a one-man band. So having a business and expanding it may have gone to another level. But no, I'm very happy the way it turned out, because I had the most fantastic sort of, teenage life and early my 20s with them. So I have no regrets, as they say.
I love that. And Leslie, I got to tell you, you have the perfect transitions. You answer a question and set me up for my next question. So you're doing
Okay.
great here. I really appreciate it. So I've read that, while you started off as in the hair business, you've moved into the fashion business, and that's really where you've concentrated a lot of your, adult life. Part of this story, right? So episode 2, we talked about the look and the feel of the Beatles and how it wasn't just you who was there.
Oh, yeah.
Right. It was Diesel
Dougie
Hoffman.
Bennett. Yeah.
Yeah, Diesel Hoffman and Benno Dorn, with Benno being the tailor who made their suits,
The
and
early
Deza
days,
doing
yes.
the photography. Did you ever talk about that stuff with him? Was there ever a fashion conversation when you guys were you in the room together with him, or were you at different stages? He was earlier on because they weren't
Yes,
necessarily
he
wearing
was. So
suits, right?
he was earlier on. And when I look at Beatles photographs from 62, let's say, till 66, I know I know they're not my hairstyles, let's put it that way. Okay.
Right.
I know the clothes, because the clothes are all collarless, dark, different, not that different, very bit robotic. They had shirt and ties up. You go look at the Rolling Stones up to 65 wearing shirt and ties. I came into what they call the peacock culture of fashion. That was how we called it here. That
Bright
meant basically,
colors.
yeah,
Yeah.
that meant, after the war, we're talking about 60s or whatever was going on, we used to say there were grey skies. And when the Beatles came along, it became Technicolor. And that's the way the fashion turned out to be. So I worked with a guy, but the Beatles, Chelsea Kings Road was the epicenter of fashion at the time. They say that there was Carnaby Street, and that became very commercial, and that was where fashion sort of really, the Who, Bullets, T-shirts were there. There were different type of suits, getting away from your father's or the sort of the bank look, where people work in a bank and everything there. But then it became commercialized. And then you moved to Chelsea. And the Beatles opened up a shop for me, a hairdressing shop called Apple Tailoring. But the shop before that was Dandy Fashions. And there were shops there called Hung on You. There was Lord John. There was so many different individual shops where individual people did individual stuff. So the Beatles used to wear different. If you look at the colours of the velvet, really was was what was happening. Flowered shirts. You had people like Mr. Fish who would wore a tie. You wear a big wide tie, butterflies, flowers. Everything was, frilly shirts. So that was a great part of what the hair and what was going on, certainly in Britain at the time, was setting, and Sassoon. So, Sassoon, the Beatles, and the culture at the time, also a Mary Quant, don't forget, with changing the ladies' fashion. She brought miniskirts into the country. You can't have miniskirts. And what she did was, which was quite amazing, that when you have women in a woman's boutique, you have mannequins in the window.
Mm-hmm.
What does she do? She put live models in the window.
Right.
And every half an hour, they would change into the shortest miniskirt you can think of in a different colour. So it'd be like a fashion show, a catwalk show in the shop window.
So you just blew my mind, because I've seen footage of that, and I always assumed that was like a commercial that they were shooting, that wasn't ongoing. You're saying that was ongoing, that would go on throughout the day.
That was ongoing. That was definitely ongoing. It made it different, and people thought it was obscene because men are staring and looking at girls in miniskirts. But it was a fashion parade. She was a designer. You went
amazing.
down the road to an incredible shop called Granny Takes a Trip. It's the most amazing shop where they did men's clothes. And and the front window, they put a Chevrolet car, half in and half out. So the half of the car was in and the half of the car was out, and the rest of it was all psychedelic.
Wow.
That's what was going on in London at the time. We had a shop called, this is a fact called Our Souls. Our Souls. They sold authentic cowboy boots from America. That shop, there were people trying to stop that shop going on because of the name. And the
Our
guy
Souls.
around, yeah. And the guy, and I've got a picture of it. So it's a big R. Souls, and all cowboy boots, all different colours in the window. So, that's what London was all about at the moment. And it wasn't until, I think it was 1966, the same thing, that Time magazine, came over, was wondering what the hell's going on. You've got 4 guys coming over with funny haircuts and silly and strange accents that they can't understand. And London has got shops called Arseholes, and they've got this one here, and they've got that one there. And they came to London, and they called it the Swinging City, and that's how Britain became Swinging London. So you've got to thank Time magazine, and the actual cover of Time magazine, I think it was in August 1966. It's an amazing cover. It got sold for, the original cover got sold for about $300,000 a few years ago.
Amazing.
But these were the cultural difference. So I'm so glad that I caught the Beatles at that stage than the other way, because I don't think, first of all, it would never have happened because they were going all over the world. But yeah, that to me was a great period, and to be involved in that was terrific. So the Beatles were a major thing. Then every different band copied the Beatles, because the Beatles were the first band to did 2 very important things for musicians, and I'm not a musician. But before the Beatles came along, people like Elvis Presley, Perry Como, Andy Williams, whoever, were big stars. They always they sang other people's material. And when it came to royalties, the composer and the producer and the manager will probably get 80%, and the band would get about 20%. So, that's how it worked. Until the Beatles go to an audition that Brian Epstein got them at Abbey Road, which was not called Abbey Road, it was called EMI then. And they first met George Martin. And George Martin, who was a serious composer, a producer, for big orchestras and operas and things, he's been told that this band is pretty good. He's doing Brian Epstein a favour. So what does he do? He gives them a song and says, right, I want you to record this. And these 4 guys have come from Liverpool, come to London. This is their big, big chance. And they said, we don't want to record the song you're giving us. Now, you've got to think of that. That's the position they were prepared to do. And when George Martin says, listen, I'm telling you that I want you to do this song, I think it'd be good for you to start off with. So they did it, and they mucked it up in the rehearsal before they were going to go. They literally mucked it up. And George Martin said, you've really mucked that song up. What's your problem? They said, we want to do our song. So he sort of went, okay, do your song then, okay? And the song was Love Me Do. And the song Love Me Do got to number 29 in the hit parade. And the song they turned down went to number 1 in America and number 1 in England, called How Do You Do It by Jerry and the Pacemakers. So there's George Martin, and there's the Beatles sticking to their guns. And the reason being is they want to write their own songs. They want to record their own songs. So when they now move on and do Please, Please Me, although they got, 3 or 4 other cover versions, one of them was Boys, it was Lennon and McCartney. Actually, it wasn't Lennon and McCartney, it was McCartney and Lennon. So if you look at the first album, Please, Please Me, the credits are McCartney and Lennon. It wasn't until John Lennon went away on holiday with Brian Epstein for some mad reason, it became Lennon and McCartney. That was just another twist. You could say what you like there, but
Interesting.
And
sounds like somebody lost a bet.
Yes. Well, McCartney said, how come that it was McCartney and Lennon, now it's Lennon and McCartney to Brian? And he said, well, John said L comes before M. Makes sense. Okay.
Convenient.
But what it did, it made other artists, right, say, you know what? We can write our own songs. We can get our own royalties. We'll get the money, not the composer. So they changed so much regarding music. It's quite amazing that maybe people don't know that too much. People just think it's automatic that you write your own songs, you do it. No one ever did it before the Beatles came along.
Right. I'm loving all of this. I want to respect your time, and I want to respect the listeners, the podcast listeners' time. So I got a couple more questions for you.
Well, I've got a few more if you want.
Before we go. In the story that we can always do a part 2. It's true. In the story, in the performance, I talk about this story with you and Paul and the song Obla Di Obla Da. Could you tell that story in your words so that we can see how close to accurate I got?
Okay, so again, as I told you, you've got to remember that all these songs, Oobla Di Oobla Da, I got no idea that's what it is, okay, at the time. So I was sitting at Paul's house on an occasion and asked him, has he written anything at all? He said yes, did something on the piano. I had no idea what he did. Then suddenly he just, I don't play the piano, but I've mucked about on the piano and gone, that, that. I've just plonked my fingers on the keys. And he sort of did the same thing. He just went, da, 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 da. Now that could have been la, 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 la. He happened to say oobla dee oobla da, but it meant nothing to me because it could have been la, 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 la. But I thought, oh, that's a catchy little thing there, but that's not a Beatles song. That's him just fiddling around there. Go listen to the album, Sgt. Pepper, and there we got it. There was Oobla Dee Oobla Da being played, and that became a song that was, Lennon hated the song, by the way, but it's a song
really
that is actually played a hell of a lot there. And there was another one that he said he wrote a song. These were sort of passing comments, he wasn't sitting there playing to me to see if I liked it or not. But he sort of said to me, "Oh, I wrote this song." He didn't say it was about me, and he didn't say, I didn't know what he was talking about. But he just sort of said, when I get older, losing my hair many years from now. And soon the moment I hear, when I'm 64. Now, I'm 20 years old. He's what? He's 25 at the time, 26 maybe. And I'm thinking, as a hairdresser, you ain't going to lose your hair, sunshine. Not at 64. Your hair's too good.
Right.
And funny enough, I thought the same about me for some mad reason. My father, bless him, didn't have much hair. My mother had a thick head of hair. I've been told to take after my mum. But in my book, I'm sure if you read the last chapter, when I meet McCartney years and years and years and years later, he's gone well. We were both past 64 when I met him. And we had a little chat, and I did say to him, remember that little lyric I heard once? And he said, "Tell me which one." So I've got so many. I said, "Yeah, you said, when I get older, losing my hair many years from now, when I get 64. And what did I tell you, Paul? I said, you won't lose your hair, and nor will I. And you know what? I'm correct. You got yours, and I got mine." So that was a few little
pretty
stories.
Spectacular.
Yeah. A couple of songs that I heard was when I went to Abbey Road Studio, one of the first times to listen to a rehearsal. And I saw, because EMI, Abbey Road's got two studios, Studio 1 and Studio 2. One, Studio 2 takes a full orchestra. And I remember going in there, sitting in the engineer's box. There was George Martin, there was Jeff Emmerich, the Beatles engineer, and I saw McCartney with a baton, conducting an orchestra and saying, more violin, a bit more this, bit more this, bit more this. You've got to understand that it was strange. I didn't know what's he doing with that orchestra because pop music didn't have orchestras. This is before Pink Floyd. This is before ELO. This is, what are they doing? That happened to be the rehearsal for Day in the Life, the orchestra version. So when I heard that, when I first heard that album, when it came out, I went, again, I didn't tell anybody. I went, oh my God, I remember that. Oh, that was Subla D. Oh, yeah. When I was 64. I kept quiet about it only because I was still involved with him, if you understand. Right. It was still going on. Yeah, they were the bonuses.
You bring up an amazing point about Paul being 25 and all of them being so young. We hear these songs, and this is true about the Beatles. This is true about the Rolling Stones. This is true about the Grateful Dead and Fish. And, you hear these albums and you're like, they were 19 when they wrote that song. Like, how did they manage to do that at such a young age? And the whole lifespan of the Beatles as a band, 7 years. I mean, it's nothing, and they were kids. And when you think about how much time has passed since then, it's just it's
those
wild.
Songs. When I'm 64, was written about Paul's uncle, and he wrote that song at the age of 15. Okay, think about that. He then writes songs. I Want to Hold Your Hand. He writes that when he's with Jane Asher, when he's living with Jane Asher's parents in Wimpole Street in London. He is not 18, 19. If you listen to the passion and the emotion of Lennon and McCartney, of romance, being hurt, feelings, you say to yourself, my God, they're young kids.
They were punching way above their weight class.
Where do you get that from? Where do you get that from? And that is talent. And that's going back, looking at their lives, observing things. It is actually quite amazing. That is mind blowing. I'm always fascinated by their output at such an early age.
It's incredible. All right, let's bring this to a head. So Storied is foundationally about the contribution and collaboration of Jews in the Jewish community to an artist, and this season's about the Beatles. And one of the reasons why I started this is because Jewish events today, Jewish community today is appropriately difficult. You go to a Jewish event and you got to leave, you got to bring a box of tissues and you got to leave and go to a therapy appointment afterwards. And that's appropriate. It's difficult. The times are hard. And I wanted to find some what we call Jewish joy, some places where we can have fun and smile and appreciate the good parts, the best parts of being Jewish and Jewish community. What does that look like in your world? I know you're not a religious man. I'm an atheist. I appreciate the tradition, but what does Jewish joy look like in your world? And what are the fun parts? What do you appreciate and love about our community?
One of the nicest parts about being Jewish, and I have quite a few Jewish friends that we play tennis, we do a lot of sports together, is the banter, Jewish banter. I mean, my hero used to be Lenny Bruce, right? Long time ago. I got into him. And then I'd listen to, I would watch it. When I want to have a good laugh, I listen to Larry David, you don't have to be Jewish to understand it, but you do. In a strange way,
Right.
Certain things you can see where he does. That's my humor, dark humor, banter, and he doesn't see anything wrong about going to a Ku Klux Klan guy on one of the episodes, and talking and whatever. But being proud, especially today, I've always been proud to be a Jew. We have some problems, I'm sure that you have the same in America, but ours is a little bit more confined because we're a smaller country, we're a smaller city with a lot of people. And on Saturdays, you can't go out really through the marches for, people are marching in London for Gaza, which is fine, Palestine, which is fine. But to go and see them at football matches, right? You watch Celtic v Rangers, or go to and watch Celtic Football Club in Scotland. People go along with their banners for their team. You'll see Palestinian flags there. You go to any march that is going on, they suddenly bring Palestine into it. And it's scary. It's scary because it is another word. Not all of them, obviously not all of them, but there is this it seems like you're protesting against Jews. You're not protesting against what's going on at the moment because it's Jews' fault. Everything
Right.
Israel does is associated to a Jew. So you must go along and think, because Israel doing that, you must be thinking. And I've had discussions with people, said, I'm totally against what's, the Israeli government at the moment, but it doesn't make, that doesn't mean to say that, against the government, not because we're Jews or not Jews. That's a bit sort of scary. It's made me, I said to somebody the other day, I told you I went to Israel in 1967. If I was a young man today, I saw that and they wanted some help, I'm not sure. I think I would probably do the same thing again. I think I think I would do that. I think I would, because I feel the same threat. But lucky enough, I live in London. I live in North London now. There's a lot of Orthodox Jews. The other day I saw a guy get on a train with his couple on, and his sisters cover. He didn't give I won't swear, but he didn't give a damn. Okay, I thought, good luck to you, mate. You just go along and do what you want to do there. But I've never seen this before, and it's creating a great big problem. And I know what the problem is. Is Israel, what's going on there? But that's the way it is, and I think it's the way it is everywhere at the moment. And it's quite sad. A lot of Jewish events. There's schools around here. I live opposite a very Orthodox Jewish school, and there are security guards there. Synagogues have got security guards there. Yeah, it's not the nicest environment I've experienced. So, but we'll overcome. That's what's going to happen, and we'll be okay with it.
I love that you talk about the Jewish banter and the Jewish humor. I told you that my dad owned a restaurant in Israel in the 80s, and he had a sign behind the counter that says, "If you start a joke and I don't know the punchline, your sandwich is on us." and people would come, and he loved good jokes, and
Yeah.
he knew most of he didn't give out that many sandwiches. He knew most of them. So
No,
my
that's right.
my last question for you is going back to the collaboration, the contribution in today's music, art, fashion, beauty, all the arts and culture scene that you've been involved in for 60 years. Where do you see today the great Jewish contributions and collaborations? What are you excited about that Jews are collaborating and contributing today?
That is a question that I haven't been asked before. I've asked a few questions. If I could be honest, I don't see it as being Jewish. I see, Rachel Weisz, is she the actress? Married to Craig Daniel, the actress. She's Jewish. I think that's her. And she did she was doing
Rachel
an
Weisz,
advert
yeah.
for somebody. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, I see someone like her who's great in films. And then I see someone like Jessie J, who's a fantastic singer. Unfortunately, she's got breast cancer. She's 33 years old. And all she tweeted, I don't do tweets on Facebook as far as I go. I can't be bothered to get involved in the other. But she tweeted that she hated the idea of the hostages and seeing the video of the hostages. She's sitting in hospital with breast cancer, and one quote, it's in the paper yesterday, she's been inundated with hatred, Jew lover. I mean, come on. So, I look at things, I don't see it in a Jewish glass. I just feel that there's more good people out there than bad people. There's a lot of entertainment that I like that wouldn't matter what race, color I am. But being defensive, I'm more defensive today on being Jewish than I've ever been in my life, because I'm a bit wary, even to a point yesterday. I was in the gym and I hadn't seen a guy what's going on, and he knows I'm Jewish, for some reason, whatever. And I played tennis with him, and he said to me, "Carl, I thought Israel would have given them more food, or whatever." He's thrown this right at me. Now,
right in the middle of a tennis match.
Hmm?
In the middle of a tennis match.
No, just before, just in the gym,
right.
warming up. So I don't get involved with too many people like that, because I probably, I need to sit down with him, have a chat. And he's I think there's a little bit of what I think inside him anyway, right? But we played tennis together, and and it's goodbye after that. But no, being Jewish at the moment is maybe more prouder than everything there, and I feel sorry for the young kids today. Seeing this, they go to work. There's a lot of all these social media. A lot of their colleagues are writing things on social media, and if you're working in a big organization and somebody there is talking, about Palestine Jews, whatever, you're working with them. I don't have to do that anymore. Had I been in that workplace, I probably would have been sacked.
Right.
But anyway.
Leslie, thank you so much for spending time with me and telling me stories.
So much indeed.
I'm really grateful for you, and I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the podcast and on the show, and yeah,
I look forward
I'm grateful
to it,
for your expertise.
And I'm available.
Experience.
What do they say? I'm available for weddings and bar mitzvahs live. So there you
go. Spectacular.
Lovely.
All right. We will talk soon, and thank you.
Yes, please. And any problems, anything you want to ask me, anything you're not sure of, please come back to me. And I think you got through I think you got a long way to go, because 250 questions. I've been prepared for it, and now you didn't even answer them.
The thing is, I've got check marks on all my questions here, because as you were speaking, you were answering questions that I was going to ask. So you did great. You did great.
Good.
So
good.
All right.
Thank you,
We'll
Benji.
see you.
Say hello to Eric, because he seems like he's doing a good job with both of you.
He's kicking ass. Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Take care. That's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe and leave us a review. It helps the algorithm show other people this great show. If you'd like to sponsor an episode, reach out. We would love to talk to you. Make sure you check the show notes for our links to socials and our sponsors. This show was produced by Ryan Storm from This Is Storm Sound. Editing was done by Andrea Rizzuto. The recording of the opening story was done live at the Berman Theater in the J Detroit in West Bloomfield with Soul Farm. Project management, Eric Nelson. Booking by Leanne Deutsch of 16 Mile Talent. Design work was done by Tessa Hewitt. And the music was recorded by Evan Sherman, but was written by my late father, Rabbi Yossel Rosenzweig, as the original opening of the song that he wrote for the Diaspora Yeshiva band Pit Huli. I'm your host and storyteller, Benji Rosenzweig, and this has been another episode of Storied, the untold Jewish stories behind your favorite artists. Season 1, The Beatles.